Hello everybody, today we're going to be kicking off the preview of the first round with our first of 8 previews, today talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now before we start, I wanted to say please make sure to subscribe to me if you're new to my channel. If you're new to hockey, whatever the case may be, I'd love to have you here along the way as I try to do this as a career. And so if you want to subscribe, make sure to do so. And I did want to add, I am not a Lightning fan. I just really like the Lightning's reverse retro jersey that they came out with this year, so I had to buy it. So anyway, let's talk about how we got here. And how did we get here for Toronto? They had an incredible season, really impressive year. For them, they were able to capture the second seed in the Atlantic Division, thanks to the Boston Bruins having the best regular season in NHL history. But still, of course, Toronto just really had a great year with these acquisitions by Kyle Dubas, and they are now, of course, in a spot where they have home ice advantage for the first round. And then for the Lightning, it was another good season by them, but they did deal with some rocky periods, or just really in a weird spot where they didn't have a 100+ point season, but have the potential to go to a 4th straight Stanley Cup Final. And now we are going to get to see who is going to get some action here, as they have a 7-game series that carried over from last year into this year with some of the heat and the passion. Of course, the series is over from last year, but I do think that a lot of the hatred will come over into this, as they are divisional rivals. There were some controversial moments in the first round last year as well. So what are some storylines to watch out for this series? Number 1, can Ryan O'Reilly be the individual that tips the scale in Toronto's favor? Of course, this is something we will watch very closely early on in this series. This was by far the biggest move by Kyle Dubas to help his team out, and he did so by getting a cup winner from St. Louis in Ryan O'Reilly. O'Reilly has played 12 games for the Leafs and has 10 points in that span. Most notably, O'Reilly was traded, and then not too long after he broke his finger and was out for a while there, and we will see how that could affect him maybe. I don't think it will, but I don't know. I think personally O'Reilly's a pretty tough guy, and he's kind of slid in for the most part pretty well for Toronto, so I'm not exactly expecting it to be a problem. But of course, too, with his arrival, Tavares moved out to the wing, so that second line is a little bit more stacked. Theoretically, you could have had one of the two play center on the third line, but with as good as these two are, you really just didn't want to see that, so they had Tavares move out onto the wing, and that will be something we'll watch as well, because, you know, naturally I think you'd like to see JT out there in center, but not the case. Not the biggest deal though, because this is a move to help them win now. And I think for them, as long as they play together, they should be able to get in the offensive zone pretty well, and we could see them kind of feed off of each other in terms of generating offense. And they might not, have the best defensive results, but at the end of the day, for O'Reilly specifically, he's been able to generate chances when he's out on the ice more than they've allowed. And he is a guy that, of course, some people think of him, the two-way legacy, but at this point in his career, I think it's more of the offensive game that we'll focus on here, and I think we could see him be a hero for Toronto if they're able to have a good series, not only for him but the team. But if they're, of course, able to win it, he definitely will be a hero, as long as something crazy doesn't happen, and maybe this team can go on a title run like the 2019 Blues squad, but we will see. For the second one, will the power play be the difference in this series? In an expected tight series like this, any edge could be the difference between going on and winning the Stanley Cup or heading to the golf course early, and the power play may very well be that thing. This is where you get really excited. If you're a fan of offense, this series actually features 2 teams in the top 5 for power play percentage, with Toronto sitting at 2nd and Tampa Bay at 5th. The good news for the Bullets is they average more time on the power play per game than Toronto. The bad news is for Tampa, Toronto buries the puck at it just early and often, all the time. I know the same can be said for the Bolts, and some key names I think for both teams to watch out for on the man advantage will be Brayden Point for Tampa Bay, who has 19 power play goals this year, leading his team, and then Lightning legend Steven Stamkos has 14. As for Toronto, their captain John Tavares leads the team with 18 Genos of his own, and former 60-goal scorer Austin Matthews has 13 for himself. Had a quiet year by his standards. I say 40+ goals is quiet year, but still one of those things where you wonder if he could really get hot in the playoffs. Other players will undoubtedly score though on the power play, but these names really stick out to me the most. If you were talking to somebody that was a little bit more of a casual fan, I think they would understand that these guys definitely would have an impact. No different for anybody that knows more about hockey. These guys will probably at least have 1 power play goal in the series. I don't know, but I think both sides will have to deal with PK as well. Unfortunately, if you're a Tampa fan, that is not really good, and it is more so good for Toronto. The Leafs really just I look at a heat map for HockeyViz, and I could show it, but I don't know. I'm going to have to ask them for permission. But on HockeyViz, it shows kind of where the Leafs are able to get a lot of their shots off. And it is red really all over the place down in the inner slot. And just the slot in general is pretty red for them. Tampa Bay on the PK has struggled a lot this year by giving up a lot of high danger shots, a lot of high danger chances, and for them, I could see this kind of being an issue. Really what it comes down to though, for this, while I will say that I think that Toronto's in a better spot on the PK, for these teams, whoever takes less penalties is going to be in a better spot. I know that sounds really silly, but in a divisional series like this, where you have the history like last year for Toronto, especially where frustration probably is running high, I think the dumb penalties could be the things that decide who wins the series and who gets to go on for a chance to win the cup. So we'll have to see for that too. But they will be having to face some potentially best goalies in the world. So let's talk about that. What should we expect in net? For number 3, if anyone is paying attention to these two clubs, you know that they've both been able to score a lot. In terms of goals for per 60, in all situations, both teams are actually tied for 3.36 goals for per 60, basically meaning they're just scoring a bunch of goals this year. Tampa Bay currently actually sits at 8th because they played less time in overtime, stuff like that. Toronto sits at 9th, but in general, you know these two teams can score a bunch, and it's evident that both teams are also going to be very busy trying to stop them from scoring. So will both goalies be in a spot where they can succeed? Who do you trust more? Right away, I think you're looking at this and you're thinking that Andrei Vasilevskiy, the Tampa Bay netminder, is probably the guy to pick here. Vasi, after all, is a 2-time champion as well as a 1-time Vezina winner and has routinely been in the running as one of those best goalies for some time. He's been there, he's done that, and he's been a workhorse along the way. That's just the fact of the matter. On top of that, you've got him in a spot where he really is motivated. I think last year, especially, there were some points where he looked kind of shaky, and he'd like to kind of get that legacy built back up, if you want to say so. As for the other side, on the flip side, you've got the 26-year-old Ilya Samsonov, another Russian netminder, who just last season was with the Washington Capitals and had, I should say, kind of an uncertain future. Less than a year later, he is finding himself top 10 in the league now for goalies and save percentage, and is almost top 10 in the league for wins. He's actually 11th for that category. His quality save percentage is higher than Andrei Vasilevskiy's, and I'll leave up what qualifies as a quality start percentage, I should say. So for that, he is in a spot where he's going to have more quality starts. But yeah, that is a good thing for them. Overall, though, you probably look at this situation and you're thinking that recent events could actually possibly sway you to think more Samsonov, as Vasilevskiy's been shaky past 10-15 games. He's had some games that are down there in the 800s for a save percentage, and last year posted a save percentage of 897. Not ideal against the Maple Leafs. Of course, that wasn't that first round. Didn't really have one game where you wanted to say this is the true Vasilevskiy game. He might have had one, but there was multiple games where it'd be like 30 goals or 30 shots against, and then maybe he allowed 3 goals, something like that, or it'd be 33 shots against, 3-4 goals allowed. So for him, he understands that this is a team that really got the better of him last year. And also you could say that they had to deal with some time on the penalty because there was a lot of dumb penalties in this series. However, I will say this. While you could be leaning towards Samsonov in this series, 88 can lock in absolutely and would be just the thing to cool off a hot Toronto offense. And now we all know how good goaltending can make up for bad teams. I think back to the run that the Montreal Canadiens had a couple of years ago. The PK really did a lot of things like trying to block every shot they could, letting Carey Price just be Carey Price at that time, and we know that those teams can go on those runs. But enough about that. As for the final topic, will Tampa's recent additions help them when they need it most? It is apparent that during points of the run that Tampa's been on, that they are a team that likes to gamble these picks away for immediate talent or people that they view can step right into this championship window that they're, kind of looking at and saying, this is what we have, this is what we're going to have to do in order to win. I know that works if you're banking on the trades to win championships, and they have been able to do so, but it's also one of those things that if things aren't going your way and you're giving up these picks, boy, does that look bad. So I really am looking at two guys here, that being Brendan Hagel and Tanner Jeannot, whether or not they can help out their team for a very tough first round, I should say. And last year, Hagel was sent to Florida, of course, in exchange for a nice haul up to Chicago that included players and picks. kind of struggled with his new team. If I remember right, he had a broken foot or something like that he played through for a really long time. Didn't really find his groove in Tampa Bay. I would say part of it has got to be because of that broken foot. I mean, if I can remember right, I think there was a story about them having to literally tape up the foot and him just being in excruciating pain to get the skate on and off before and after every game. But he's really blossomed into something else that Tampa needed this year. He's actually in that spot where he is young and competitive and set a career high in a number of categories like goals 29, assists 33, and points 62. He can be a threat off the rush and could be a guy that gets timely goals for Tampa and might be remembered as a key piece to kind of keep this championship, train rolling in the right direction. But if he hits a snag, then the team could hit a snag. But I'm hopeful for a good series from him. As for Tanner Jeannot, much more skeptical on his end. And that's concerning considering the 5 picks that the Lightning sent Nashville's way for him. Yeah, I think David Poile might have just fleeced him there because Jeannot did score 24 goals in his full rookie season last year, but has stumbled to just 6 in his second full NHL campaign. At this point, I'm a little bit more worried that Jeannot will be that guy that is stuck in a bottom 6 role and is known for, wow, he had that one really good year and he's more of a physical, gritty player in the bottom 6 that is known for that grit and sandpaper kind of play style. And it is reported, though, that the 25-year-old could actually miss the entire series. So you're looking at this, and this is not Jeannot's fault, but imagine Tampa trading all these picks, Jeannot not being the guy that they need him to be, and then also missing the first round. If they lose, that one's going to really be one that stings there. But I guess for that one, we will just have to see what the injury report is going to be for there. And I only really expect Hagel to be kind of one of those big roles to help Tampa Bay out. So, having said all this, who do I think is going to win this series? Because it's going to be a good one, I think. I'm going to pick the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7 games. I know that last year I picked Tampa in 7, but I decided to flip it. The Leafs just statistically have been better in a lot of different ways. Metrically have been better. You watch them play, and it feels like things are running a little bit more smoothly at times, and they've been more aggressive to improve their roster. I don't know if my friend from work, Steve's going to watch this, but Steve's a huge hockey fan, and we were talking about it the other day at work where I said, at the end of the day, this wasn't the only trade that Toronto made by getting O'Reilly. They got Shin, of course, too, and some other guys, if I'm not mistaken, but Shin and O'Reilly being the bigger ones. But you look at what Toronto was able to do, bring in O'Reilly, and you look at what Tampa Bay was able to do, and they were bringing in Jeannot. It was already a close series last year where some penalties were kind of controversial. And I think in general, Toronto is just in a better spot. You look at Tampa Bay's cap space and their lack of first-round picks that also probably played a factor into what they could do and couldn't do with a trade. But in general, I'm looking at this and absolutely see a Toronto team that should be able to match up, if not be better than Tampa Bay in most ends or most spectrums of the game. I do think goaltending could be a big thing because if Samsonov falls off, Matt Murray is injured and I don't think he's going to be able to play this series. I looked stuff up and it kind of seemed foggy about that. So if Matt Murray's not able to play, things could be kind of problematic there for Toronto in it. And again, if Vasilevsky's able to get hot, who knows? That's kind of one of the beautiful things about this sport. Upsets happen, and that's just the case. So yes, we will see, and yes, Toronto's consistently choked, and yes, Tampa's stars could absolutely wreak havoc in this series, but I do think that this is going to be the year where I should say Toronto is going to get out of the first round and get over some of the, the memories of years past. That being said, John Cooper is a great head coach and has achieved a lot with this team, and we are going to get a great divisional clash here. Anyway, who do you think will win this series? Why? And in how many games? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you go love hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.